And welcome back to WGN-TV Political Report. Americans are reeling from another string of mass shootings in both Atlanta and Boulder, Colorado, leaving 18 dead in total. Even in Chicago, 2 mass shootings over 2 weeks have rocked the city's south side. Now, the debate turns again to Congress, where previous efforts to pass background checks and ban assault weapons have failed. His 11th district covers part of Chicago's west and southwest suburbs, including the Henry Pratt warehouse in Aurora, where a gunman killed 5 people in 2019. Congressman Bill Foster joins us this morning to talk more about the path forward. Congressman, good to see you. It's been a while. Thanks for joining me.
Yep, happy to be here.
So, look, gun violence, gun control efforts have been tried for decades. There's now a Democrat in the White House. Democrats control the Senate and the House, but yet there are pro-gun Dems like Senator Joe Manchin. How do you get anything through when you don't have that solid gun reform bloc?
Well, I think that ultimately Republicans in Congress, all members of the Senate, are going to have to listen to the American people on this, because they don't have an ambiguous position on things like universal background checks. And the gun violence, as you mentioned, is not a new issue. 12 years ago when I first took office, it was right after the NIU shootings, and I represented NIU. 17 students were injured and 5 were killed in the Cole Hall shootings there. And I spent the first few weeks of my time in Congress attending memorial events and doing what I could to help my community. And it was 11 years later, in 2019, that we had the Henry Pratt shootings in Aurora. And so what we did in the House is what we always do, which is we stand together for a moment of silence. And then in that case, we passed what should be everyone's first start towards this, which is a bill for universal background checks, and then saw it die in the Senate. So this is, this is a longstanding frustration, and the Senate has been the source of blockage of things that have been supported by the vast majority of the American public in so many instances here. And it's good that they are finally having serious discussions about, how to make it a functional democratic body.
And by the way, of course, even after Sandy Hook, when children were killed, people thought that will be what it takes to get them to do anything, and nothing happened. But here's the thing, the Senate is in recess now for a couple of weeks. How important, because I know you're having sessions, you're doing some things, and we're just coming off of these tragic events in Colorado and Atlanta. How important is the timing of it in terms of now there's sort of breathing room before the Senate even comes back?
Well, look, at the Senate and everyone in politics is starting to think about the next election. And the Republican Party is going to realize it has to choose between its embrace of the NRA or losing the suburbs for generations. Because that is what I see has shifted in the decade that I've been in politics, is that guns have gone from something that people in the suburbs, they thought gun violence was a central city problem, maybe some people out in the very rural areas, but not really a suburban problem. And that's changed. And particularly the young people. For many of them, either gun violence or climate are issue number 1 and 2. And the Republican Party is on the wrong side of both of those issues for so many young people.
So let's assume that Congress remains behind the will of the people for a while. There's a history of that. If that's the case, President Biden has not been afraid to use the executive order and use the pen, as President Trump was not afraid to use it before him. Do you have a sense of what it is the president could authorize by executive order? Everything will get fought in the courts, but what would you encourage him to do if, in fact, things get stalemated?
He has very limited power. Most of them are I'm afraid, largely symbolic. There are things you can do. I think it's unlikely, for example, that he could just reinstitute an assault weapons ban, but he may do things on the edge of what the exact definition of an assault weapon means. It's going to be tough. They're reclassifying the ghost kits. These are these guns that are made out of parts and don't ever have serial numbers. Those, I think you can do some good there. And the other thing that we could do is to fund community intervention programs. One of the things that really impressed me about what happened in Aurora, which is the second largest city in Illinois. And 20 years ago, there were 27 people killed in a typical year from gun violence in Aurora, mostly gang violence. And so what we saw in response to that is the community coming together. And we had enforcement from the FBI and the Bureau BATF anti-gang enforcement units come in to assist the police force, the sheriffs. But we also had community groups come up and step forward for after-school programs. And what we saw in Aurora was over the 10 years following that, the number of gun deaths dropped and dropped and dropped until in 2012, we went an entire year with 0 gun deaths in Aurora. So you can accomplish things when the community and the federal enforcement authorities come together.
Yeah, Congressman,
I think we need that.
I've got less than a minute left, but I do want to ask you this. The NRA, I think you would agree, is kind of a shell of itself of what it used to be now, with some internal scandals and problems, and yet they continue to seem to have a very strong grip over members of Congress. Is that true, or what can Congress people do to break that grip of the NRA?
Well, I think it's certainly true of members of the Republican Party who have to survive a Republican primary election, or members whose political machine has become very dependent on NRA money for its existence.
Yeah.
But Democrats, many of the Democrats came out here who won out in the suburbs, like Lauren Underwood, Sean Casten, and others. They did so in defiance of the NRA.
So it sounds like it's going to be a work in progress. And with my apologies for cutting you off, we've run out of time. Congressman, please come back very soon. There's so much more to talk to you about.
Happy to be here.
All right, Congressman Bill
Stay
Foster,
safe.
appreciate your time. One more break, we'll be back.